Is it just me, or is it getting hot in here? Buckle up, friends, as we're sizzling into 1980s King. Here are 19 reasons to read Firestarter. Hi everyone, I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and thanks so much for coming back to my channel and checking it out. If you like what you see here, feel free to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any videos in the future. In this one, we're continuing our chronological trip through the works of Stephen King with the first book he put out in the 1980s, another blockbuster novel, Firestarter. If you want to go back and see what I thought about his books from the 70s, then do explore my channel, they're all there waiting for you. For each one, I give you 19 reasons to read them. Why 19? Because, well, Stephen King. Anyway, enough chat, let's jump into 1980, let's get started with Firestarter. Here are my 19 reasons for you to read this book, and as always, some potential spoilers ahead. So having made a name for himself in the 70s with really spooky shit, with Firestarter, King had to go as more of a sci-fi thriller. It's got adventure, shady government agencies, and human bad monsters rather than traditional spooky ones. It rumbles along at a good pace, it's a hell of a ride, and is a lot of good fun. All that's not to say it's a total wildcard to what he's done before. In fact, you could even argue that Firestarter is just a rehashing of Carrie. It's something King worried about himself. He ended up switching back to finishing off the Dead Zone because he was so worried that people would just think Firestarter was Carrie Mark II. Now, from my point of view, I think those criticisms are pretty harsh. Sure, both stories tell of girls that can do shit with their minds, but that's about it. And in fact, even when you start scratching the surface there, Carrie can move stuff with her mind, Charlie and Firestarter can burn stuff with it. And as the stories pan out from both of them, they go in wildly different directions. So I don't think King needed to be worried. And if you see anyone saying that Firestarter is Carrie Mark II, just call bullshit on them. So I've kind of covered a bit of the hook of the book, but let's pad it out a bit. So our main character, Charlie McGee, is born with pyrokinesis. She's had that talent from birth, and it's because her parents were both subjects of some government experiment on a new drug called Lot 6. Now that experiment gave Charlie's mum Vicky mild telekinetic abilities and her dad Andy the ability to control people's minds, what he called pushing. That's the sci-fi part. The thriller part comes from the fact that the government agency who ran that test hears about Charlie and her powers and wants to hunt her down, capture her, and keep testing her to see how they can use her as a weapon. The book starts with Charlie and her dad on the run. It's breathless and frenetic right from the very start. Why isn't Charlie's mum with them, you might ask? Well, it's because that shady government agency fucking killed her, not before ripping out all of her fingernails and then ultimately bundling her body into a closet. Nice. That isn't the only grim scene in this book. The scenes from the Lot 6 trial are pretty darn gruesome as well. Some of the participants go on the wildest trip of their lives, while one of the others claws his own eyes out. What's most scary though is the way the shop, the shady government agency, just tries to cover it all up afterwards and convince everyone who took part that what they saw was nothing more than a hallucination. Government agencies, eh? So here's a random fun fact connected to Firestarter for you before we crack on with more points about the story. So while King was writing this book, he had a vasectomy, and one day he started bleeding from the incision. Now rather than stop writing and go to hospital right away, he was determined to soldier on and get to the end of the paragraph before leaving his desk, to the point where his wife Tabitha found him collapsed in a puddle of blood. Lovely. That mention of King's reproductive system, that reminds me that Charlie McGee is kind of based on his own daughter, Naomi. I'm guessing she is not a woman to fuck with. So while this is more thriller than horror, there are plenty of scary parts. Particularly those parts where you'll have a character who finds themselves just being alive and not on fire, and then suddenly finds them still alive but on fire. Now burning to death is one thing, but for me the scariest killing was when Andy's psychiatrist fed his own arm into the garbage disposal user under his sink to kill himself. All done while wearing his wife's underwear. Why did he do that? Well, it's all to do with these echoes that happen as a result of Andy using his push on somebody. The smallest, tiniest little detail can trigger something in that person's mind, and then it bounces around from side to side like a ping pong ball, building and building and building until finally exploding. It's a really fucking cool trick that King added into this book, and gets really overlooked because of all of the fire. As for the guy wearing his wife's underwear, well, you'll just have to read it to work out that bit. So I said the echoes get covered by the fire, and it's worth reminding you, there is a shit ton of fire in Firestarter. Burn, baby, burn. So I can't quite believe I've got to reason number 12 before mentioning Rainbird. Let's talk about Rainbird. Rainbird is the shop's hitman. He loves killing people, particularly so he can watch the life go out of their eyes as they finally snuff it. He hears about Charlie and he decides he really wants to kill her and watch her as she expires with his one eye. He lost the other one in Vietnam. To try and win Charlie's trust, he pretends to be an orderly at the facility where the shop eventually takes her, and he spends time building friendship with her to win her over. That fucker is evil. I should also mention Irv Manders, the farmer who takes in Charlie and Andy earlier in the book when they're on the run, and stands up to the shop and ultimately helps our heroes escape and hide from the shop for a little bit longer. He doesn't even mind when Charlie accidentally sets fire to his house, his barn, and a load of his chickens. What a dude. Another random fact for you, this book is dedicated to the author Shirley Jackson. He wrote, "In memory of Shirley Jackson, who never needed to raise her voice." So the climax of this book is Andy and Charlie reunited in the shop's facility with a plan to escape. Only problem is, Rainbird is hiding in the rafters with a gun. Essentially, shit goes down, Andy gets shot, and with his dying breath, tells Charlie to burn that place to the ground. Yeah, she burns that fucker. More government scariness at the end of the book. They simply dust themselves off and tell the world that it was a terrorist attack, and then get back to doing whatever evil stuff it was they were doing before. Relentless. So I mentioned fire, right? Charlie has so much of it that she can melt bullets in mid-air. Finally, another fun fact. King has said that he had occasional wild moments of imagining an adult Charlie McGee meeting a grown-up Danny Torrance and having them marry and go off to live in Salem's Lot. Now, part of me thinks that just sounds like some horrendous fan fiction, while the other part of me has already pre-ordered that book. Which one are you? Okay, there you have it, 19 reasons to read Firestarter. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more videos. And maybe hit me up on Instagram as well. I'm at Dave Musson on there. Oh, and that music you heard in the background and quite possibly hated, that's my band Chapter 19. Specifically, it's our song Stephen, which is about Stephen King. If you didn't happen to hate it and you'd like to listen to it properly, there's a link to find it on Spotify in the description. There's also a link to the video we made where we managed to cram more than 60 different references to Stephen King works in one video. Why not go and have a look and see how many you can spot? Among those references, and in the middle of that video, you get to see me in a prom dress. What more could you want? Anyway, thanks for watching as always, and join me next time for quite possibly the worst book Stephen King has ever written. Until then, take care, and don't get burned. See you next time.